Hello, everyone. So I'm back, and I'm taking that so I don't have to hear myself. I'm here to talk about what if. Now, I'm not here to talk about what. Let's just go back for a second. Now, when I started the new year, I made a New Year's resolution to everyone, and that New Year's resolution was that I would not, under any circumstances, continue to be biased toward Marvel. I was like, you know what? It's New Year, 2023. It's time to just not be biased toward Marvel. Just sit up a little bit. And so that was what I said I was going to do. Guess what happened? The entire year, I was not biased toward Disney. I was not biased toward Marvel. I criticized them for Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. I criticized them for a few other things. I was fair. I was honest. So, what's the best way to wrap up the new year with continuing this New Year's resolution? By talking about what if. Now, what if did a few things. So first of all, season 1 was god-awful. Like, it was literally trash. It was the single worst thing Marvel had put out up to that point. And it wasn't even close. It was almost unwatchable. Season 2, I went into with some hesitation because of that. Because season 1, I think the biggest thing was they tried to be parodies of the movie too much or the movies they were trying to kind of recreate too much to the point where it kind of just felt like you have these different people and they're these different voice casts, and they're animated, and some casts are not different from the movies, but some characters are. But it was kind of like you're trying to retell the same stories, but you're just putting in different things, and it's kind of boring. I'm not gonna lie to you. And also, again, there was a jarring sense, and I think the smarter thing they could have done in that case was use some of the, Avengers Assemble and other kind of, Avengers projects where you've had a lot of these characters appear and use those voice actors instead, just so there's some audience familiarity with those characters. And because there's certain cadences, which I think, even in this season to some extent were a little bit of a factor. But what they did do in this season, which I think was clever, was especially early on, right? They started off, they used a bunch of sub characters, right? Happy Hogan was the star of one. You had Nebula as the star for episode 1. So I think those were the first 2 episodes, if I'm not mistaken. It kind of blends together because they've been releasing one every day. By the way, Marvel, don't do that. I like weekly releases. I know Echo's going to be a binge. I'm going to have to do that, but I do like weekly releases, so don't do this. Daily thing was messing with my brain because I had to keep remembering to watch a new episode every single day. But, either way, episode 2, those 2 episodes were great because they were kind of like these sub-characters, smaller characters, and it wasn't as important, if there are a few, Iron Man showed up at the end of the Happy Hogan episode, and it was kind of like, whatever. You kind of know, okay, well, that's not Robert Downey Jr. The cadence is good enough in the few lines he has, where it's not like you're like, wait a second, that sounds weird, right? Then they did this weird thing where they kind of reverted back to their old self. And this made me angry. And this is when I tweeted that I was going to have some very angry things to say about What If. Because they did go back to what they did before, right? And they had, the Avengers all show up, right? I think one of the first episodes of that was, I think it was the Peter Quill one. I'm not sure. I don't remember off the top of my head. No, it wasn't the Peter Quill one. That was fine. I think it was the one after that. It was the race car one, the Formula 1 racing thing, whatever episode. That was the one with Iron Man and the Grandmaster that I think was the one that really pushed me kind of toward the edge on that. Because I was kind of like, why do we need this, right? And then the other one, I think, which I don't remember if that was included as part of my tweet, but it was the episode with Captain Carter and the portal thing that opened at the end of that episode. It had Lake Bell as Black Widow and was that whole Winter Soldier parody, I guess. That was another one where I was kind of annoyed because, again, you kind of went back to the thing which, I didn't really like. Although the funny thing about that episode is kind of made everyone realize how ridiculous the Steve Rogers, Bucky Barnes relationship is, which is something I've been saying forever because of the way, how, it's almost like they played up in that, between, in the same roles they played up between Peggy and Steve, which makes it just seem all the more ridiculous when it's Bucky and Steve. kind of shaping the entire MCU because of that relationship. But what I will say beyond that, I guess, is that when those episodes, I was legitimately thinking, okay, is it even worth watching this? Whatever. And I was like, I'll watch one more episode, but if it's this again, because, I was really happy. Like, you did these small stories, you did these cool, different things. Then you're kind of reverting back to what I didn't like about season one, right? Outside you kind of take yourself too seriously. You're not, the Doctor Strange episode, which I get it, whatever. It was probably one of the worst, and wasn't one of the worst. It was, not a great episode from season one. And I think it was because it kind of took itself way too seriously, right? Because it's trying to do this thing, and it was like, who cares? But what I will say, the next episode where they did something, which I'll tell you, I've been really hoping they would do with this show, which is they would feature a new character, right? Introduce a new character and feature that new character who people can get attached to, because this is the thing, right? When you have, what Star Wars does so well, and I'm kind of jumping here a little bit, but this is something that's important to talk about. So Star Wars did something which is really hard and really rare to do correctly. And what that is they went from the prequels, right? And they basically did a perfect transition from the prequels to Clone Wars. And I think one would argue the prequels cast actually did a better job, kind of became more iconic in those roles than, the Clone Wars cast became more iconic in those roles than the prequel trilogy. And I think it actually helped the prequel trilogy. Like when you saw Hayden Christensen come back as Anakin Skywalker and Ahsoka, I think that was really helped by the Clone Wars. And actually, I think Ahsoka herself, again, it's something where they did, I think, a pretty good job moving her from animation to live action, right? But whenever you do that cross thing, between animation and live action, it's really difficult to do. Star Wars does it remarkably well. I know people have some misgivings about Ahsoka's transition, but either way, and I had some misgivings about Thrawn's transition, but either way, you got to say, especially with Obi-Wan and Anakin, that transition was flawless. I think most of the characters in the Clone Wars were a flawless transition. And they, by the way, had obviously different people voicing the characters, but it just worked so well. I don't think What If has that same effect. I don't know why. I would have to probably do a little bit more of a comparison to try to understand why, but I do think there is a little bit of a difference, right, when you move those characters over, and I think it helps so much Star Wars as a whole having the Clone Wars kind of fix the prequels in a sense, versus having What If, which just seems to be harming, doesn't seem to be doing much in terms of fixing. So, when you look at all of that, and then you kind of come back to this idea of What If, and then you introduce a new character, and I'm like, you know what? This is what I wanted, right? Because you're introducing a new character who people can get now excited about, right? Because the problem with Marvel is they've kind of they're kind of trying to find, how do we get this new marquee character who people are going to be excited about? You know how you do it? You test it out on TV and then you bring it into the MCU, right? You test it out on TV, you say, hey, look, let's try this character or whatever, let's see what happens. People like a character, and then you're like, let's bring him, because you have to somehow find a way to build a character up, right? And then bring them in. It's kind of like in a company, if you have a product, right? You test the product out on a smaller audience, you see what the reaction is to that kind of prototype product, and then you bring it to a wider market, right? You don't just say, let's release this new product, right? You obviously got to do it smart, and this is the smart way to do it. Obviously, you do it with Miss Marvel. And look, Miss Marvel, again, say what you will about the Marvels, Miss Marvel translated perfectly from TV to film, and I think you go look through every review, who is the biggest standout of that movie according to everyone, even people who hated the movie, is Miss Marvel, right? So I think you do that, and I think you got some feedback about She-Hulk for sure. It would be interesting to see when and if. I'm assuming it's more of a when than an if, but when they bring her into live action, you can kind of see what that reception is, and if they make tweaks to the character, which I'm assuming they will based on the reception they get. But it is a very positive thing, and I think What If, it hadn't done that. Really, Captain Carter, I guess, was kind of the only one who they did that little bit of testing with, but I think they definitely made it work, right? And I think this season you did so much more, right? And I think that episode was probably the best episode because you did get to see this new character, and you're like, let's go. This is a new cool character, and we are definitely going to be we're definitely going to be using this character further because I think she was just received so well. And also, it's a cool story. Although the other thing I noticed is like it feels like every time Marvel introduces a minority character or a character from a minority group, right? They're always just like from like these deep, like they've deep cultural ties. But then for everyone else, it's just like, yeah, I got bit by a spider. Or I'm just like smart and my dad's rich, right? Like Black Panther, it's deep cultural heritage, which is associated with powers. Miss Marvel, right? Deep cultural family heritage, which is associated with her powers. You look at Shang-Chi, deep family heritage, right? Like even the new character, the indigenous character, the Mohawk character they introduced, right? It's deep cultural heritage. It's not, and I don't know. I feel like that's funny. Like every time they do it, it's always this deep cultural heritage, right? And it's not a bad thing necessarily, but it almost feels, and I don't know if this is true, but it almost feels like they're trying to find, they have like this out now of like, well, how many people from this culture can really have superpowers, right? So maybe we can't really focus on all of these characters. And so I think that's kind of an interesting way you can a cynical way you can kind of look at this and say maybe they're trying to put a ceiling on how many characters from a certain group can actually show up because all of their powers are connected to this deep culture, right? Which obviously they all share. So how can there be this many superheroes from this culture? Which, I mean, again, cynicism a little bit, but it is interesting. And then, but then kind of talking again about what if, right, is you kind of continue through and I'm like, okay, you know what? And that's when I decided, okay, I'm just going to wait because there are new episodes every day. It's not like I'm waiting a week anyways. So let me just let's see how this ends, right? And then I don't watch the next 3 episodes. I wait till they're done and I just then kind of binge through the last 3. And I'll tell you, I was heavily impressed. And I was heavily impressed because they did something. And what I mean by that is they actually went out and they tried to build a story, right? It wasn't just, hey, here's a bunch of one-shot kind of things, whatever, have fun. It was, hey, we're building a story here. We're kind of expanding because, again, what if it's a perfect opportunity, by the way, to even test out the multiverse? And, it is to kind of look at the multiverse and what the multiverse kind of does. And, sorry, Easy A's on the screen there, so I'm, like, looking over sometimes because I'm, like, trying to, Anyways. But, like, it's like, let's kind of get people kind of used to the multiverse and this, and let's kind of explore what the bounds of the multiverse are in this kind of an animation environment where you can kind of do crazy things, right? And I think that, that's a very interesting thing, which, again, I don't think they did enough in season 1, right? Like, they didn't explore the multiverse in season 1. They just kind of said, yeah, we're talking about the multiverse. So I think with season 2, they did do that, right? You had Captain Carter kind of, and it's funny again how the MCU kind of continues to run through a Captain America or a version of Captain America, but you had obviously that whole thing, and you had the lead up to what I think was, a crazy chaotic shitstorm, right? And that was all fine, right? Where you had Captain Carter and, oh my God, I cannot remember her name, and I don't want to say it wrong because I'm worried. Like, I don't want to be disrespectful, whatever. Like, I don't want to, Kahore? I don't know. That sounds wrong. But whatever her name was, oh my God, should really know what her name is. But sorry, I just looked it up. Kahorti, that's her name. So anyways, when you have these two characters, kind of just essentially dominate, kind of dominating Doctor Strange and destroying him, and kind of using all of these different, like the Hela Crown and the Ultron Killmonger Infinity stuff. Like, it's just kind of all this ridiculous stuff, but it's okay because because it's animated, right? So it doesn't have to be realistic. It can be crazy, and it was fun. But yeah, I think that was. Like, I think that kind of redeemed itself, and I think kind of showed, if we're being honest, a blueprint for the MCU, right? And I think that's kind of like the very interesting part of this. This chair is terrible. That's the very interesting part of this, right? Is that, like, you have this situation where you have a template for how to use the multiverse, right? Like, I think that obviously doing what they did was kind of chaotic, but you can definitely do something, right? Like, you kind of know what you can push the limits to. Now, it's good that there was a trailer for Season 3, which is good. I think I'm excited for Season 3. I just hope that they do something which is, again, I hope they learn, because the episodes with the smaller characters and the episodes with especially because, again, and people will kind of say suspend your disbelief and whatever, and which is fine and all, but you have to do, to some extent, understand you can't have an episode featured about Iron Man if Iron Man is not going to be voiced by Robert Downey Jr. Like, you know, I get it, multiverse. You can say all that stuff. As an audience member, that is a very frustrating thing when Iron Man is obviously Robert Downey Jr. Now, Iron Man's a little bit of a weird one because his cadence can kind of be mimicked in a way. But there is still that level of like Lake Bell, as much as I love her as a voice actor and as an actress in general. She was Poison Ivy on Harley Quinn, right? I just don't think she did a good job as Black Widow. I think it was too jarring from Scarlett Johansson's voice. Again, I understand the multiverse, and you can say that all you want, but it doesn't change as an audience member. I see a Black Widow, and I'm like, I don't hear the right voice according to that. Again, if she looked completely different than as a Black Widow, then maybe then you can convince me. But just psychologically, like, just my brain is not making that connection. Even if my brain is saying you should be making that connection, right? So I think that they do have to understand who the audience is and understand if you're trying to expand to an audience who, again, like, you have to remember there are audience people who don't, like, members of the audience who don't watch the animated shows typically, right? MCU viewers, even other Disney Plus viewers who don't like watching animated shows. That's not for everyone. And so if you want to make the transition more seamless, right, you have to make sure that it isn't too jarring. It isn't too much of like a, oh my God, I just don't see this, right? So, that is Marvel's responsibility to some extent, and they have to do that. And I think if you use characters, again, if you get Happy Hogan, right, that was, I think, a great episode. It was a fun episode, right? I also think there were some episodes, like, again, that I'm going to go back to that Iron Man one on, with the Grandmaster, where, like, this feels like a Disney World ride that they're just kind of like testing the grounds for in a TV show. And again, it'd be a cool Disney World ride, or a parks ride or whatever. But I just think that, like, you have to kind of understand it from that perspective, right? And I think, again, they did a good job retaining voice talent for this, by the way. And I think they did have some people who did excellent jobs. Again, I think Iron Man actually did a decent job, especially in that I think the second last episode where they were back in the olden days, where you had, and again, I it was interesting because, again, when they had Captain America, right, who was revealed to be the villain, like, I thought that was very interesting, or like, not villain, but like the person causing all the problems was kind of an interesting twist, because when you think of when you think of Captain America, right, like, he looks like Nomad, and I even said, I was like, oh, he looks like that's like Nomad, right? And look, it turned out I was right, it was from Nomad time, right? Or like when he had the beard and the shield like that. So, again, it's a very interesting thing. The other thing I think they don't have to do is you don't have to always kill Thanos. Like, you don't have to, like I understand to some extent, but at the same time, like, Thanos is, like, if he isn't going to be a part of the future, we don't have to keep bringing him up. Like, I understand he's in every multiversal version, right? And actually, I think it did, in my mind at least, bring in some cool ideas of, like, what you could do with the multiverse, right? In terms of bringing Thanos back, but also ways that you could kind of replace Kang, right? Because I think you do have some very cool options in the multiverse, even if you do choose to, like, bring back Ultron, for example, right, with the Infinity. But the other thing we learned, I guess we kind of already knew it, but, like, to some extent we learned, is the Infinity Stones are multiversal. Like, they obviously, we knew from Endgame they exist in every multiverse, but that they're not all collected necessarily, or they're not all going to be collected in every multiverse. And when you think about infinite numbers of them, I don't think we've actually seen anyone have, like, 7 different pairs of Infinity Stones, using the powers of those. I don't know if that, makes it better or whatever. I don't know. I'm sure there's a comic somewhere that talks about that, but I don't know off the top of my head. But again, What If was a good show, right? I think season 2 far exceeded season 1. I'm actually excited for season 3, as opposed to be dreading season 2 after season 1. I think they did have some excellent moments. I think they had some very backwards moments where they just should not have done what they did. But again, overall I was impressed, which I think is a very difficult. It's a very interesting thing, because, again, I didn't expect to be impressed. And I think you did some interesting things. I think if they do more of this, where they say, hey, let's focus on some side characters. Yeah, we can have some main characters appear in and out, but we have movies, which are the stories of the main characters, right? The goal of the TV from the beginning was to make stories about side characters, right? And make stories about underappreciated characters and make stories about new characters, right? Like that was the goal of the TV shows, right? They said, okay, we're going to do WandaVision, we're going to do Falcon the Winter Soldier, we're going to do all these things because we don't know what we want them to get a little bit of shine for the audience, but we also don't want to make movies about them because not everyone needs a movie, right? You did that. That's what If should be. So, anyways, I think that was, again, it was good. I was impressed. I'm just trying to think if I forgot anything. Oh, the Hela episode was really cool, too. I really enjoyed that one. I thought, that was really a nice one where it had a lot of parallels, obviously, to Thor, but it, Thor 1. And also kind of makes you wonder, why didn't Odin do that to Hela in the first place? Why did he trap her in hell? I feel like doing the Thor thing and teaching her a lesson would have probably been the better way to go about it. Just generally, I don't understand why and maybe, you can make both the versions of that decision happened. But, I feel like it doesn't even make sense that it was ever a decision. It just seems like it worked so well. And, again, not going to get the multiversal logic of anything, but I just think that was an interesting decision, which makes sense. So, I also have to probably rewatch that one because it got a little bit distracted toward the end because the Raptors made a big trade. But I was still watching. I was just freaking out as well. So yeah. Anyways, overall, again, What If was good. I think the last 3 episodes were excellent. I think the 2 episodes before that, 2 or 3, 4. I think 4 of the other episodes were great. I mean, that means I guess I'm just trying to think, was that 3, was that 6, it was 6 great episodes probably? So, and I think it was a 10 episode season. 6 great episodes is really good. And, hopefully they keep this up with season 3, Marvel Zombies. I think that's still coming out. So, we're going to get more of this. Anyways, let me know what you thought of What If down below. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, share your thoughts, follow us on social media. Again, this is a cool show. I was really angry after those 2 middle episodes. I think 2 middle episodes, because I thought those were just regressing back to what season 1 was, which was a disaster. Again, outside of the zombies episode. But again, Marvel's kind of figuring it out, and I think they did. Again, I hope they kind of understand you can build a bigger story here without it having to be kind of this crazy story. And also, it's fun to see the Loki tree at the end, or the Loki multiversal tree. And it'll be interesting to see where Captain Carter pops up again. Obviously, she'll pop up in season 3. I wonder if she'll pop up in any. We've seen her pop up in Doctor Strange. I wonder if she'll pop up again. I hope she does. And all these characters kind of pop up because I think Happy Hogan being a Hulk, I don't think that's gonna. I don't think that's not going to be something they carry over, especially if they're waiting to see what the audience reaction to that is. I don't think that's going to be something they're going to be waiting to see, waiting to carry over to the MCU live action thing. So, again, I think that might be coming sooner than we think because I think that reaction is just going to be so positive. But, again, overall, good episode. Let me know your thoughts down below. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, share your thoughts. Follow us on social media. We got a lot of great stuff coming. And see you all next time. Bye.